Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. 888-589-8840. Got a couple of more sound bites on the debate on gay marriage at the Supreme Court. I want to go back to the piece by Nelson Lund, A Social Experiment Without Science Behind It. And the point that he's making here, in fact, let's grab clip number 2, Rob, if we can, the Justice Alito clip, is everybody's making these assertions as a part of the debate. You know, the guy on the BBC last night did the same thing. Every study in the last 10 years has all said exactly the same thing. Same-sex parenting is just fine. And this Nelson Lund from George Mason University says, look, there is no social science that supports same-sex marriage or same-sex parenting at all. None. This experiment is simply too recent. He writes this as, again, the Wall Street Journal: the justices are unlikely to take so momentous a step unless they are persuaded that granting this new right to same-sex couples will not harm children or ultimately undermine the health of our society. A significant number of organizations representing social and behavioral scientists have filed briefs promising the court that there is nothing to worry about. These assurances, he says, have no scientific foundation. I repeat, this is Nelson Lund, professor of law, George Mason University. He says all of these organizations are saying, hey, kids are fine, nothing to worry about here. These assurances have no scientific foundation. Same-sex marriage is brand new, and child rearing by same-sex couples remains rare. Even if both phenomena were far more common, large amounts of data collected over decades would be required before any responsible researcher could make meaningful scientific estimates of the long-term effects of redefining marriage. The conclusions in the research literature typically amount at best to claims that a particular study found, quote, no evidence, end quote, of bad effects from child rearing by same-sex couples. One could just as easily say that there is no reliable evidence that such child rearing practices are beneficial or harmless, and that it is the conclusion, and that is the conclusion that should be relevant to the court. Social science advocacy organizations, however, have promoted the myth that a lack of evidence so far of bad effects implies the non-existence of such effects. This myth is based on conjecture or faith, not on science. Talking about same-sex parenting, he says there are no scientifically reliable studies at all, nor could there be, given the available data. Yet the Supreme Court has been solemnly assured by many scientific organizations such as the American Psychological Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics that the overwhelming weight of evidence indicates that same-sex couples are every bit the equal of opposite-sex parents in every relevant respect. He says the number of studies may be overwhelming, but the evidence assuredly is not. So he says there's a lot of studies out there, excuse me, there's a lot of studies out there that are worthless. They are based on anecdotal evidence. They are based on small samples like 18 or 33 or 44 cases, he says. Some of them are completely anecdotal. The effect of parenting by male homosexual couples remains in the realm of anecdote. So a lot of these studies are just stories told by two homosexuals who are trying to parent. He says the prominent National Longitudinal Lesbian Family Study relied on a sample recruited entirely at lesbian events, in women's bookstores, and through lesbian newspapers. That's hardly going to be an objective sample. In 2012, sociologist Lauren Marks conducted a detailed reanalysis of 59 studies of parenting by gays and lesbians that were cited by the American Psychological Association in a 2005 publication. Mr. Marks, who teaches at Louisiana State University, again, this is not part of the vast right-wing conspiracy, concluded that the association drew inferences that were not empirically warranted. So there's no social science that shows that same-sex parenting is harmless or beneficial. None. Zero. Zip. And then he goes at length through the study done by Mark Regnerus that indicates no, in fact, there's good evidence that it's harmful. So there's no evidence that it's beneficial or harmless. And the most thorough study that's ever been done says, no, it is harmful. 77 out of 80 outcomes. And this is how he concludes his piece. If the Supreme Court constitutionalizes a right to same-sex marriage, however, there will be no going back. The court cannot possibly know that it is safe to take this irrevocable step. Now, this is what Justice Alito said yesterday in part of his oral argument, clip number 2. This is what he's saying. Look, we've only had same-sex marriage since 2000. So we've only had same-sex parenting, for less than that. We just don't have enough to go on. Here's what he had to say.
The one thing that the parties in this case seem to agree on is that marriage is very important. It's thought to be a fundamental building block of society and its preservation essential for the preservation of society. And traditional marriage has been around for thousands of years. Same-sex marriage is very new. I think it was first adopted in the Netherlands in 2000. So there isn't a lot of data about its effect. And it may turn out to be a good thing. It may turn out not to be a good thing, as the supporters of Proposition 8 apparently believe. But you want us to step in and render a decision based on an assessment of the effects of this institution, which is newer than cell phones or the internet? I mean, we do not have the ability to see the future. On a question like that, of such fundamental importance, why should it not be left for the people, either acting through initiatives and referendums or through their elected public officials?
And he's exactly right. He's saying, what is this thing doing in court? Because you are asking the Supreme Court to impose same-sex marriage on the entire country, and it's only 13 years old. It's new. It's newer than the internet. It's newer than cell phones. We simply do not have enough data right now to know what the long-range implications are going to be if we impose same-sex marriage on the country. But once the Supreme Court does, I mean, not that we have to listen to what they say and do, but right now everybody does. Even they do something grossly unconstitutional, everybody meekly complies. But the reality is, if they impose this on America, then there's no way to go back from that. I mean, it becomes a done deal. And if the effects are harmful, and it turns out that they're well quantified and they're well supported harmful effects, and in 10 or 15 years, we've got all of the social data together, and it proves that same-sex households are bad for kids, it's going to be too late. And it's going to be one generation after another of poor, innocent young children are going to get chewed up by being raised in suboptimal environments. And so Alito's saying, look, this really belongs with the people. But, we're already hearing from what Justice Kennedy had to say. You got 4 conservatives, 4 liberals, Justice Kennedy, one black-robed tyrant going to make marriage policy for 315 million Americans. And he clearly seems to be leaning in the direction of imposing same-sex marriage on the federal government, saying to the federal government, even though you hire people, even though you pay them, even though you award benefits, you have absolutely no right to decide for yourself who qualifies as a spouse. That's a no-brainer. If the federal government's going to hire people and they're going to give spousal benefits, then they obviously have every right in the world to decide who qualifies as a spouse. That's not a decision for the Supreme Court to make. That's a decision for our elected representatives to make. That's why I've said all the way along that the fact that this is even in court represents a huge loss for the whole concept of constitutional government. Now let's drop down to clip number 4. This is a gay marriage supporter outside the Supreme Court yesterday, and here's what this supporter of same-sex marriage had to say.
Because I'm supporting marriage equality, and I want people to know that it doesn't matter what you believe in, whether you believe in God or whether you believe in the devil. Love is for everybody. It doesn't matter.
It's okay to believe in the devil?
It's okay to love the devil, but if you love everybody else, then it doesn't really matter. Now,
okay, so that is a same-sex marriage supporter. It's okay to love the devil. Now, yesterday, Ted Olson was asked about polygamy. I mean, Justice Sonia Sotomayor was the one that grilled him on this a little bit. Hey, if you're saying that two people of the same sex can get married, that marriage is a fundamental right, what restrictions could you ever place on marriage? That was her question, and he fumbled all over himself trying to say why polygamy would not be permitted, but same-sex marriage would. And he finally came down saying, well, if you prohibit polygamy, you're prohibiting conduct. Well, that's exactly what you're doing when you're not legalizing same-sex marriage. That is about conduct. It's about what two people do when they come together for sexual intimacy. You are prohibiting, you're refusing to recognize conduct. And Olson said if you ban gay marriage, the reason you can't do that is you would be picking out a group of individuals to deny them the freedom that the court said is fundamental. Well, you're doing exactly the same thing if you say to polygamists, you can't get married. What are you doing? You're picking out a group, and you are denying them the freedom that the court said is fundamental. So the point here is once you cross this threshold, if the court legitimizes same-sex marriage, there is no place to stop. Plural marriage is going to be next. Mike Huckabee making the point, I think he's exactly right. If the GOP walks away from natural marriage, they're done. Evangelicals will walk. We will leave the Republican Party in droves. Reince Priebus is out there trying to dance a middle tune. Not going to work. And ladies and gentlemen, we got to start thinking about 2016. Rick Perry out there yesterday saying unapologetically, in Texas, it is clear about where this state stands on the issue. The people of the state of Texas, myself included, believe marriage is between one man and one woman. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's got to be a non-negotiable for 2016.